Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm Dr. Downey, and today we're going to discuss liver health and how to protect your liver when on cycle and even when you're not on cycle, just to make sure your liver is as healthy as it can be. So first we should identify what causes liver distress in particular in relation to performance enhancing drugs. And obviously the first one would have to be C17 alpha alkylation of steroids. Essentially, this is a modification to the steroid that makes it more orally bioavailable, but this modification, and it allows it to avoid first pass metabolism in the liver. However, this alteration does make it a bit more liver toxic, so that's why you will see here that oral steroids are liver toxic. Not all of them though, there are a few that aren't, such as Proviron and oral primobolan. There are others. And then we have injectable steroids, so this is a bit odd because they aren't really known to cause liver distress, and they don't really. However, in most studies, you'll see at the beginning of a trial, they'll have a transient elevation of liver enzymes, which return back to baseline after a week or two. And then we have trenbolone here. This is more from anecdotes on forums, but they tend to display that trenbolone might cause liver distress more so than other injectable steroids. And then because there are other fat burners and things that may cause liver distress, and or you could be taking other supplements that are known to cause liver distress. So first of all, we need to cover the basics. These are just what you should have in place before you even start a cycle, or when you start a cycle using something that causes damage to the liver. So hydration is going to be key because it causes a dilutionary effect. So in acute liver failure, we have there's high levels of bilirubin, and bilirubin is quite nephrotoxic, so we hydrate the patient with an IV drip. Now, you'll never get bilirubin levels as high as those in patients with acute liver failure unless you do go into acute liver failure, but you ideally want to be hydrated so that if you do get that transient elevation, it doesn't do too much damage to the kidney. Again, you want to reduce your burden on the liver, so reduce alcohol consumption when using any steroid really would be ideal, and you want to reduce hepatotoxic drugs if you can. Obviously, if they're prescribed to you, you can't change that, and I would advise sticking away from hepatotoxic steroids. So that could include things like paracetamol or Tylenol or whatever you call it. Then we want to use the minimal effective dose because the effect is dose dependent and duration dependent. So you want to get the most out of the least, essentially. You want to use less hepatotoxic compounds if you can. Something like Anavar will cause, although it is still hepatotoxic, it will cause less hepatotoxicity than others like Winstrol. Then again, your genetics. So I've discussed this in a previous video, but some people just react badly to certain steroids and get skewed liver ranges on the normal dose or normal bodybuilding dose. And that could be due to a genetic polymorphism on the cytochrome P450 enzyme. So if you do have a bad response to one oral, I would not suggest you use it again, because clearly your body does not agree with it or cannot metabolize it properly. Now we're going to look at the staples. So this should be in place in any cycle, or these just have the most research, or they have randomized controlled trials and have been demonstrated to be quite effective, especially amongst steroid users on forums. So we have TUDCA, N-acetylcholine, or cysteine, sorry, and L-Carnitine. So TUDCA or UDCA is I cannot pronounce it, but deoxycholic acid. TUDCA just has a taurine modification, which essentially was there to make it more bioavailable than UDCA. They're both bile salts slash bile acids, and they increase the synthesis of non-toxic bile. They also like increase the flow of bile by increasing gastric motility and things like that. So people tend to say they get hungrier on it. That's because it increases gastric motility, or and gastrointestinal motility, sorry. Well, and gastric motility. So it increases that bile flow, so there's no stagnation of toxic bile, or even non-toxic bile. If it stagnates, it eventually damages the actual hepatocytes or liver cells. And it aids in conversion, so it kind of neutralizes toxic bile, essentially. But this is all very basic language, but yeah. So it's shown to help a lot in cholestasis, which is essentially where that just means cholestasis means a stasis of bile, which means bile isn't moving. And that's cholestatic jaundice is the most common, or I would say it's the most common one we see with steroid users if you look at case reports. So the TUDCA should be in place because it helps prevent it and treat it. So if you're looking for prevention, 500 milligrams to 1 gram a day is ideal. If you want to treat your hepatotoxicity, or let's say you got blood tests and you see, oh geez, I've got drug-induced hepatotoxicity from this, you would want to use above a gram a day. And I mentioned do not exceed 8 weeks because it does have a deleterious effect on your own cholesterol. So then we have N-acetylcysteine. It's a potent antioxidant, and with this comes its immunomodulatory effects. It's used in the treatment of Tylenol or acetaminophen. We call it paracetamol overdose because it increases glutathione reserves, and glutathione is quite important for neutralizing toxic metabolites. So it reduces your toxic metabolites, mitigates hepatotoxicity, and a dose of 1 gram to 2 grams daily can be used, or 1,000 to 2,000 milligrams daily. And there are no long-term studies, so I would suggest only using it on cycle. However, people suggest it is harmless and you could use it for a long period. I would err on the side of caution, especially with this, as there was one study, it's mice, but it's just, if you don't have to use it, don't use it. That's my theory. So L-Carnitine, I don't see it mentioned enough, but it's essentially, I know of it because it's used to treat valproate-induced hepatotoxicity. Valproate is an essentially an anti-seizure medication or anti-epileptic, and what happens is it depletes carnitine in the mitochondria, so you need a supplement with carnitine. But also in the mitochondria, carnitine is important in ammonia regulation, and a deficiency in it causes high levels of ammonia, which is not ideal because you get a condition called hepatic encephalopathy. So there was actually a meta-analysis done where they were just looking at its effects for ammonia, but they also noticed a significant reduction in bilirubin, AST, your blood urea, nitrogen, and creatinine. So it has spillover effects. It does seem to protect the liver, and it's also been shown in mice and rat that it does protect against drug-induced liver toxicity, and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So a dose in the meta-analysis, they used 4 grams or 4,000 milligrams daily, and they noted that it didn't matter which route of administration they used, but as we know, it seems that carnitine is a lot more bioavailable if injected. But which is the case for most drugs. So the additional supplements, so these are just, there are 1,000 you could think of that could also help. The other 3 that I mentioned were had better evidence for them, but so milk thistle, artichoke, leaf extract, and choline are mentioned a lot. There are a lot of others. So in terms of milk thistle, I did speak about it in the kidney protection video, but it's a very potent antioxidant, and it has a flavonoid, which is silymarin, and as I mentioned, it decreases markers of inflammation, and the only problem is these studies that looked at milk thistle only kind of looked at it in subcutaneous or IV formulations, which if you're taking it orally, oral bioavailability isn't great, but there still are a lot of studies demonstrating its effectiveness in reducing markers of liver damage, and in combination with artichoke leaf extract, which I mentioned below, it is very potent in protecting against drug-induced liver toxicity. It almost reduced it to nothing. Well, the enzymes didn't even budge. So 2 grams to 3 grams daily is used. Then we have artichoke leaf extract. I don't see this mentioned that much on forums, but this also has about as much research as milk thistle, and it's again, also a potent antioxidant, but it has a lot more different types of antioxidants in it. It's mainly been researched for its effects on lowering lipid levels, but it has been shown in a randomized control trial to reduce non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And in this, they demonstrated there was a reduction in bilirubin, AST, and ALT, with on sonar an increase in hepatic blood flow. And as I mentioned before, in combination with milk thistle, it was very potent. So a dose that in this RCT that looked at 600 milligrams daily, and that seemed to be effective. However, if you're on cycle, you might look at increasing this dose. And choline, I just mentioned it because I see it mentioned on forums, but I couldn't find many studies or human trials that demonstrated its effects in liver protection, but it is known mechanistically to decrease fatty acid accumulation in the liver. However, as I mentioned, studies are lacking, and it has functions elsewhere which may make it beneficial elsewhere, but a dose of 250 to 500 milligrams daily is generally recommended, and obviously if you're on cycle that would increase. So though there are 1,000 other different supplements you could take for liver health, but these are the staples. The top 3 were the staples, and I think obviously liver health is taken quite seriously because a lot of steroids do tend to affect the liver, and so this is just one way you could protect your liver. So I hope you enjoyed that video. Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video.